Welcome to Forward Ever, Leading in Challenging Times, presented by Worth Wealth Management, a weekly conversation with area leaders about how to persevere during uncertain times. Now here's your host, Gary Shorman.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Forward Ever, Leading in Challenging Times. And one of those challenging times is in Washington, D.C. I'm not sure ever not a challenging time, but it seems like there are a lot of things coming together. Our Senator Roger Marshall, is with us on the call today talking about what's happening in Washington, D.C. But my first question, Senator, do you have time for anything? Because I see you on TV, I see you on social media, I see you on hearings. Do you have time to do anything else, or is this 110% of what goes on in your life?
Well, much like being a doctor on call, there's always one more thing to do. But I carve 45 minutes out every day to work out. We have a little gym here in the Senate building, not too far from where I am right now. It's not very fancy, but it works for me. And then faith is still real important to me. So try to carve out 30 minutes every morning for reading scripture, praying. Lots of fun things up here that I get to do. I don't hunt and fish as much as I used to get to, but I've got out several times this winter, had a good hunting season. And my dad and I can't wait till the ponds thaw out there in the Flint Hills, and we'll get out and do some fishing together.
You know, there's some things about Kansas that I'm sure you miss when you have to be in Washington, D.C., and that's one of those. What we have here in Kansas is really pretty special.
Oh, it is. I live between two wildlife refuges. We don't have the best of anything, but we have everything. So I enjoy going out in the field. I miss my dogs. I lost my Labrador retriever this past summer, so I really miss my dogs when I go out hunting. But fortunately, my friends still have some. Love getting out there with them. Had all my children and grandchildren home for Thanksgiving. Went out and did a lot of hunting as well then for deer as well as crane and some pheasant and quail. So it is just, I love my home.
You know what? I want to ask an overall question. Sometimes when you watch the news, it used to be the evening news, but now the news is on all the time. You get the feeling that maybe the world's falling apart. When you're in D.C., does it feel that way, or is it just what we're watching that gets that sort of feeling in your system?
Well, I think I'm really concerned about several things. An open border, the national debt, huge concerns. But yet the world's not as bad as what you might see on the national media. I'll give you for instance. Bernie Sanders and I are very close personal friends. We both want to fix healthcare. We don't always agree on how to get there, but we agree on the same goal. This morning, a bipartisan prayer breakfast we have once a week. So as much as you see the doom and gloom, I think there are many goals that we share. I think with the access that you implied constantly to social media, to 24/7 news, we're filled with the bad things, but not the good things. I still think there's hope out there. I still think that we're this bright, shining city on a hill. We have challenges before us, but I still think there's hope before us as well.
Well, I know you've been traveling recently in Kansas. Are Kansans in general looking at it that way? Do you feel that back from Kansas or from Kansans?
I think there's a lot of concern, Gary. We've done 2 telephone town halls, and I think that's where we can just touch many people. We did one with a group of senior citizens, one with young adults. And there was thousands of people on each of those calls and a couple of surveys. And interesting to me, they both had the same top 3 concerns. Their number one concern, again, these are senior citizens and young adults. Their number one concern is the open border, lawlessness, safety, and security. I kind of lumped that in one bucket. Maybe here's the surprise, though. Both groups said that the threat to their constitutional rights was their number 2 concern, their number 2 worry. And number 3 was the economy, whether it's inflation, those types of things. But the economy has dropped to 3. And I kind of started feeling this back in last fall when I just saw the fervor of the open border rising to the top. And I said back last October that this would be the open border be the number 1 issue for this political season for the presidential election. And it has risen to that. So I would say that the concern from Kansas has never been louder. And just a super majority of them feeling like they're not better than they were 3 years ago. Like maybe 80% of folks said they weren't better today than they were 3 years ago.
Well, let's talk about the border. Where are we at with the border now? Because again, the things we see are they're just people streaming over the border, and we don't really have anything to do with them or any place to really put them. What are you doing in D.C. right now that's dealing with that?
Well, first of all, I think we got to describe the problem for what it is. 10 million people crossing the border illegally in the last 3 years, 1.7 million gotaways. Those are people that the Border Patrol can see, but they're not able to apprehend them and get an ID on them. 30,000 Chinese nationals across the country, 300 terrorists. So this is a real problem. 300 Americans dying every day. We have the cartel has stations across the state of Kansas, human trafficking. So this is a very real problem. My number one priority up here right now is to secure the border. This is something we've been, trying to bring to the attention of others since we arrived here in the Senate 3 years ago. So there is legislation we're working on. It's kind of stuck though right now. My priority is to secure the border. This White House's priority, on the other hand, is to work on the immigration. They want to grease the skids. They're more concerned about how many people can they get across the border and take a snapshot of them and then release them. So we really disagree on the same goal, and that makes it really difficult for me. I'm going to talk about one part, what the holdup of this bill is, Gary, and that's the parole portion. Under Barack Obama, he paroled about 5,000 people per year. 5,000. Joe Biden is paroling 700,000 people every year, basically saying for whatever reason, come on into this country. He's breaking the law, actually. The law says you're supposed to consider these parolees one at a time. He's doing it tens of thousands at a time. So we're trying to write legislation that would tighten up that parole, but we're stuck on it. We'll see if we get anywhere.
You mentioned a little bit of administrative side of things. I think your team is writing, and you're writing a letter right now to the Bureau of Alcohol and Tobacco and Firearms. One of those things that can really affect Kansans because of whoever is in the management end of that isn't necessarily following the criteria. What's that letter about?
Right. So certainly I was sent to DC by Kansas to fight to protect our constitutional amendments, and that includes the Second Amendment. So what the ATF is currently doing is they've actually shut down several of our gun stores that sell guns, one in Reno County and one in Wyandotte County as well. And they shut them down because of a clerical error, that they misspelled something. So I think that the punishment doesn't match the crime. Look, these gun shops, professionally owned, want to obey the law. And since I've been here in Congress, we've tightened up some of the background checks. So they're doing their best to get that done. But we have an ATF that's overreacting and trying to shut down some of our gun stores. So we're pushing back. We're saying, look, you're again, the punishment doesn't fit the crime here. Cut us some slack. If we've sinned, if we've done something wrong, give us a chance to fix it. But in this case, it's literally just some misspelling of words that they're shutting these gun shops down for.
Farm bill, big deal for everybody here in Kansas, whether you're a farmer or not. We know farming is an important aspect of what we do. Where are we at with the farm bill right now?
Well, I go back to that term, we're treading water on it. There's really been no movement on the farm bill for about a year. We write a farm bill every 5 years. This is the year we're supposed to do it. We couldn't get it across the finish line. We've extended it to the end of September. The bill that's been proposed by my friends across the aisle is not very farm friendly. As you may know, about 85% of a farm bill is actually nutrition programs, which I'm in favor of generally speaking, but the nutrition programs have tripled in cost. They went from $60 billion a year to $180 billion a year. So my friends across the aisle want more money for food programs, but ignore the farm and the farm bill. The backbone of a farm bill should be crop insurance and what's called Title I funding. They're unwilling to make some increases in those. So we're at an impasse for right now. I think we'll figure it out. But this farm bill is so important to Kansans. As agriculture goes, so goes Kansas. Even a community like Wichita or Kansas City, probably 25% of their economy is agriculture related as well. And then the food program is so important to the urban America as well. And lastly, about 5% of this farm bill are conservation programs, which I'm in favor of as well. And finally, some of the high-speed internet, there's funding for those types of things, rural hospitals. So you're right, a farm bill is very important. We're kind of stuck right now, but we'll get to it hopefully after we get the government funded again here come March.
Is there a key to getting it unstuck?
I think the key is finding the money. And right now, this country is $34 trillion in debt. we're going to spend more money on interest than we do the military, approaching $1 trillion a year on interest. So I think that trickle down of just not finding the money, I think that's the key, is where do we find the money to pay for these programs? And right now we haven't found the money to pay for the crop insurance component of this, to the amount of money that we do need. So it's much like running your own budget, running your own business, Gary. It's how do we fund this? Lots of good ideas, but we like to pay for what we're doing.
Senator, I'm going to talk about continuing resolutions because we keep kicking the can down the road. Going to take a quick break. We'll come back and talk about that because you voted no, and I want to talk about why that is, and it plays into the answer you just had on this last question. Our guest today is Senator Roger Marshall, represents us from here in Kansas in Washington, D.C. Back with more after this.
The most successful investors are those that can keep their emotions in check and take a longer-term view at what portfolios will be worth 3 to 5 years down the road. I'd say that's the most important in determining what investor outcomes are. Market corrections will continue in the future. We've seen many of them over the years, only to see equity prices rise higher, and that'll be the case in the future.
Worth Wealth Management, enhancing lives and strengthening families.
Welcome back to Forward Ever with Kansas Senator Roger Marshall. Senator, thanks for taking the time to jump in here. We talked going into the break about the Farm Bill and finding money for that. But you were one of our Kansas senator. You're as a senator, and 3 Kansas people in the House of Representatives voted no against the continuing resolution to extend the amount of money we can spend. Talk about that a little bit in your decision in that.
Right. So Gary, I believe the number one most immediate threat to America is our open southern border, but the number one long-term threat to this country is our national debt. I talked earlier, $34 trillion of national debt, spending almost $1 trillion on interest alone. Much like your family can't live like this on this type of a budget where we're borrowing $2 trillion a year, we're spending $2 trillion more a year than we're actually bringing in, or your business, it can't operate this way. This is what's driving inflation, among other things. We don't follow any type of normal budget process up here. The way the rules are written, the laws are written, is that we're supposed to go through 12 buckets of funding through committees and then bring those to the floor. So as early as last July, the Senate had finished all 12 of those funding buckets in committee. And Leader Schumer, Democrat Senator Leader Chuck Schumer, has only brought 3 of those buckets to the Senate floor. I would prefer to take these on one at a time where they all see the light of day. If there's a bridge to nowhere, then let's shine a light on it. Let's be efficient with American taxpayer dollars. So rather than a long-term approach, what Leader Schumer has chosen to do is these continuing resolutions where we fund the government for 30 days at a time, 60 days at a time. It makes no sense. The way that it's so hard if you're, whether you're a farmer or whether you're building $3 billion Navy ships to start and stop without any type of certainty. So it's my point to them is we need long-term solutions. We need to go through these buckets of funding one at a time. I gave them one pass, but I didn't give them a second pass.
One of the things I know in traveling through Kansas, you hear things back. You really didn't talk about it much. The Ukraine, what are Kansans feeling about support of the Ukraine and the Ukrainians?
I hear mixed feelings about it, but to me, it's about priorities. What I hear from Kansans a lot is we need to take care of our own security, that we need to secure our own borders before we're out there fighting to help others as well. So I think it's a mixed bag. I don't think that people really, there wouldn't be a clear answer. If I really had to take a vote, I think the majority of people would say no more. We've given them $113 billion. Enough is enough. We've been stuck in Ukraine for a year. There's been no movement back and forth. We've lost 200,000 people have died in this Ukrainian war. We need to be working towards a peace agreement. I think that's probably a very consistent thing I'm hearing from Kansas is let's stop killing each other. Isn't there a peace agreement we can work on in Ukraine? But again, back to point A, secure the border.
You have several of the, I'll call them the town hall meetings. If you're at home, I've had one of those. You get a phone call, you can jump in on a town hall meeting. I know that's important to you. And when you do that sort of thing, What is your message? If somebody hasn't been on one of those, what is your message to Kansas that kind of helps be on the positive side of where we're going? When people pick up the phone, they attend one of the town hall meetings, come to see you in person. What's the message you like to give about why we're in the right place and that why we're that shining light on the hill?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I think the number one is communication. I always thought the best doctors were good listeners. I think the best senators are good listeners too. So I try to spend more of my time listening. For instance, this call, the telephone town halls, we don't get every person's question answered publicly, but 90% of the questions that were being recorded were questions about the border. So it helps me to prioritize where we're going. And I think my message of hope, if you would, Gary, to folks is this. Look, I wouldn't trade China the hands that we've been dealt. America has everything she needs to be that right shining city on the hill. I don't think we're better off today than we were 3 years ago. I think we have to address the border. We have to address our constitutional rights. We have to address the economy. But we have all the ingredients we need. We have incredible natural resources, whether it's natural gas or oil. I'm a big fan of nuclear modular reactors. I think that's the future. But what I really like to talk about is the innovation and the hardworking ingenuity of Americans. That's what's always led us, is innovation, not government rules and taxation, but is American innovation, American hard work. That's what's going to drive this. As long as we get our schools right, Gary, we're going to be just fine. We got to take care of our youth, and we don't need Washington micromanaging our schools. I believe that the folks back in my home of Great Bend, Kansas, very much want to do what's best for the students there. I'll try my best to keep Washington out of it. So my message of hope is we have incredible youth. I get to meet them every day. Met a lot of them up here with the March for Life just a couple weeks ago. These kids are sharp. They're going to do a great job. I'm up here focused on the next generation, not the next election.
I love it. And if somebody wants to find you, instead of sitting back and complaining to your friends down at the donut shop, how do they talk to you and say, hey, Senator, this is an issue that I'd like to hear from you on? And how do they do that? What's the quickest way to touch base with you?
If they just do a web search for Roger Marshall, they're going to find our marshall.senate.gov, marshall.senate.gov. You can email us. We've got offices throughout the state of Kansas. They can call one of those offices close to them. And honest to goodness, we try to get some type of reply to everything that's sent to us. My staff collates all those questions. We try to send back a letter. There's really 4 or 5 questions that people ask us constantly each week. It's a little bit different each week, but we're trying to respond to them. I do keep track of people that reach out to us. I don't pay attention to people from other states call us, but I do pay attention to what Kansans are doing and saying. Marshall.senate.gov.
Senator, thanks for taking some time. I know you have a lot of things to do. Thank you for taking time to talk to us and talk to Kansans. Appreciate that. And our guest today has been Senator Roger Marshall, our state senator from the state of Kansas. He's been our guest on Forward Ever, Leading in Challenging Times, brought to you by Worth Wealth Management. I'm Gary Shorman.
Thanks for joining us for Forward Ever, Leading in Challenging Times, presented by Worth Wealth Management. Join us right here next week for another episode with host Gary Shorman. Until then, remember to move forward ever, backward never.